You're watching the History Fair channel, and in this video we're looking at Splendid Isolation. Splendid isolation is a term used to describe the 19th century British diplomatic practice of avoiding permanent alliances, particularly under the governments of Lord Salisbury between 1885 and 1902. The concept developed as early as 1822, when Britain left the post-1815 concert of Europe, and continued until 1902 Anglo-Japanese alliance and the 1904 Entente Cordiale with France. As Europe was divided into two power blocs, Britain became aligned with the French Third Republic and the Russian Empire, known as the Triple Entente, against the German Empire of Austro-Hungary, Germany and the Kingdom of Italy, the Triple Alliance. The term itself was coined in January 1896 by a Canadian politician, George Euless Foster. He indicated his approval for Britain's minimal involvement in European affairs by saying, "In these somewhat troublesome days when the great Mother Empire stands splendidly isolated in Europe, there is considerable historical debate over the extent to which this approach was intentional or accidental, its impact, or even if it ever existed, other than as a useful phrase." 19th century British foreign policy was characterised by a reluctance to enter into permanent alliances with other great powers, often assumed to apply only to the latter part of the century. Some historians argue it originated after the 1822 Congress of Verona, when Britain withdrew from the post-1815 concert of Europe. Guided by Foreign Secretary George Canning, his principles dominated British foreign policy for decades and have been summarised as follows: non-intervention, no European police system, every nation for itself, and God for us all, balance of power, respect for facts, not for abstract theories, respect for treaty rights, but caution in extending them. England, not Europe. Europe's domain extends to the shores of the Atlantic. England's begins there. For much of the 19th century, Britain sought to maintain the existing balance of power in Europe, while protecting trade routes to its colonies and dominions, especially those connecting to British India through the Suez Canal. In 1866, the Foreign Secretary, Lord Derby, explained this policy as follows: "It is the duty of the government of this country, placed as it is with regard to geographical position, to keep itself upon terms of goodwill with all surrounding nations, but not to entangle itself with any single or monopolising alliance with any one of them. Above all, to endeavour not to interfere needlessly and vexatiously with the internal affairs of any foreign country." One exception was the 1839 Treaty of London, recognising the independence of Belgium, which led to Britain entering the World War I in 1914. The ports of Ostend, Antwerp and Zeebrugge were so important to ensuring control of the English Channel. Britain guaranteed Belgium's independence by military means if required. Diplomatic historian Margaret Macmillan argues that by 1897 Britain was indeed so isolated, but far from being splendid, this was a bad thing. Britain had no real friends and was engaged in disputes with the United States, France, Germany and Russia. Historians have debated whether British isolationism was intentional or dictated by contemporary events. A.J.P. Taylor claimed it existed only in limited sense. The British certainly ceased to control themselves with the balance of power in Europe. They supposed that it was a self-adjusting. but they maintained close connection with the continental powers for the sake of affairs outside of Europe, particularly in the Near East. For John Chalmers, Splendid Isolation was a fiction for the period, prior to the Franco-Russian alliance of 1894, and reluctantly pursued afterwards. E. David Steele argues that although Salisbury once referred to Splendid Isolation, he was being ironical at the expense of those who believed in the possibility. Another biographer claims the term unfairly affixed itself to his foreign policy, and that Lord Salisbury discouraged its use, considering it dangerous to be completely uninvolved with European affairs. If you found this video helpful or informative, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel.